Welcome to the Achievable FINRA podcast. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have affordable courses for the FINRA SIE and the Series 6, 7, 9, 63, 65, and 66 exams with industry best pass rates. Each Achievable course includes everything you need to pass your exam the first time. A full textbook, videos on key topics, thousands of questions backed by our memory-enhancing algorithm, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to get 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today, we have Ken Finnen back with us from Capital Advantage Tutoring. Ken, really excited to have you back and would love if you can introduce yourself.
I'm happy. I love being here. My name's Ken Finnen. I run a tutoring company, Capital Advantage Tutoring, and I also run a YouTube channel called Series 7 Whisperer, along with my TikTok under the same names and Instagram under the same. I offer a lot of free courses on there, over 1,000 videos on all the different tests. And I have been in the business since really a long time ago, probably before most of you were born. I worked on the stock exchange for almost 25 years. And as I tell everyone, I have either traded, sold, or fired someone for everything on these exams. So this is not, I don't know this stuff because I read a book. It's because I've actually lived most of this stuff. But I'd love to get into some questions.
Yeah, and the big one for today and what we're going to be talking about is the T+1 settlement state change, which is kind of the biggest change in the FINRA universe in a little while. And it's also, I think, just like good for, consumers, right? For really kind of just the business of Wall Street anyway. So maybe we talk about that first. Like, why did this change come into place in the first place?
Well, what it does is it takes risk away. So, like, there's different kind of firms, right? So there's like an introducing firm, which just has customers, and then there's like a clearing firm that does all their settlement and like takes their trades and stuff like that, and has risk that if the introducing firm falls away during this time between when you buy it and when you settle, they have risk. Mm-hmm. There's risk that if something bad happens, they lose the money.
Right.
So they're taking that risk away. So when I first started, it was T+5. So it's 5 business days in between when we bought it to when it settled. So there was 5 days that something bad could happen. Then it went to T+3, T+2, and now finally T+1. I do think eventually it'll get to T0, but it could be a couple of years. It's just the cycle's speeding up when they change it because, between AI and all the computers, they can settle stuff a lot quicker.
Right.
So the reason they shorten it is to make it less risky for the firm.
Yeah. No, and actually, sorry, I realized that maybe what we should have started with, just because this is like an intro for some people, is to talk about just so what is settlement? What is the mechanism of settlement, and how does the, basically like how the mechanics work? And then we can talk about why reducing the time is significant.
So when you buy or sell shares, if you buy, like the way it used to be, is you buy shares on a Monday. Mm-hmm. Well, right now it settles the next day. What that means is that when you buy shares, your money, the broker-dealer that you're using, they send the money to the person who sold you the share. So let me back up a little. Mm-hmm. You're working at broker-dealer A, and you are a customer of broker-dealer A. Right. You're not working there because you will be after you pass the exam. You're a customer of broker-dealer A, and you buy 1,000 shares of ABC at $50. Well, you're going to owe $50,000. So a broker-dealer B sold you the share, or their customer. Mm-hmm. So what's going to happen is you're going to buy it on Monday. The next day, broker-dealer A is going to send $50,000 to broker-dealer B, and on the same day, on the same Tuesday, T+1, broker-dealer B will send the 1,000 shares to broker-dealer A. So settlement is what they call completion of the trade, when the money and the securities change hands.
Right. Exactly.
And that's really what settlement is. That's literally it's that simple.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on something that I want to highlight, particularly for the younger people listening to this, which is like, I think that, and I mean, I think it's very fair to assume this, but when you are thinking about the stock market in the context of today's apps and also in the context of like how crypto works, you kind of think of buying shares as like on Robinhood or whatever is almost like you're kind of buying from a pot and then you're selling into a pot. But that's not actually how the real world works. And it's also not how the world worked at all, 20, 30 years ago when you were doing Wall Street day to day. Like instead it was Bob bought shares. And if you wanted to buy shares of this company, you had to buy them from Bob, right? And Bob had a guy who was his broker-dealer wealth manager, and you had a guy who was your broker-dealer wealth manager. Sorry, guy or girl. And they called each other up and was like, hey, I have a client that wants to buy shares of ABC. And the other guy goes, well, you know that my client has shares of ABC. It's probably why you called. They're like, yep, okay, well, let me see if he's willing to sell. And it was like it was a trade between two people facilitated by the market, right? Yep. Nowadays, it kind of feels like you're kind of throwing money into a bucket or getting money out of a bucket. But all that still happens. It's just all obfuscated by the platforms and happens on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, that's the difference between the primary market and the secondary, right? Mm-hmm. The primary market, you're buying it actually from the issuer, the company like Ford or IBM. For the secondary market, right, you're buying, Bob and Mary are trading with each other through the broker-dealer.
Right.
Now, it's sped up now because in reality, a lot of the firms, they do it internally, but that doesn't help the conversation. So the conversation here, like you said, you're buying from Bob, and Bob, you're going to send the money to Bob, and then Bob's going to send you the shares on T+1.
Right.
Now, I have to bring up one thing on this. Now, in reality, that's when the broker-dealer settle. But when you have to pay, there's another thing called Reg T settlement, when you, the customer, actually have to have the money in the account. Prior to this, it was 4 days. So if you bought on Monday, you had to deliver the money by Friday. Now it's 3 days because everything got shorter by a day. Mm-hmm. So in reality, if you buy shares on Monday, broker-dealer A is sending the money on Tuesday. You actually don't legally have to have the money in the account until Thursday. So the broker-dealer is almost lending you money for 2 days. And that's why Reg T of the Federal Reserve Board is involved.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring that in, that's a different type of settlement.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, it shortens the risk. It shortens the risk.
Well, it shortens the risk certainly for the broker-dealer because they're not like floating the money in the meantime, right? I think it also, though, is good for the risk of everybody involved, right?
Right. Absolutely. I don't know how much it saves the customer so much. It's not, for the customer, it's just easier. But in reality, I don't think it makes a big deal to me whether it settles tomorrow or the next. I mean, other than, we'll get into the ex-dividend date and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think on a monetary basis it's as big a deal. Maybe for accrued interest for a bond, maybe that would help because there's 1 day less of accrued interest. But all that stuff kind of washes out in the end. It's definitely safer for the firms. Mm-hmm. It puts less monetary. And I bet you that saves them so much, millions of dollars, not having to pay interest, not having the risk, stuff like that.
Well, and because they, essentially when the broker has sent the money on your behalf, but then you owe them the money, that's a liability, right? And there's a lot of rules on Wall Street about, proportional to your liabilities, what kind of assets do you need to have on hand? So this will reduce that. Probably not by a tremendous amount in total, but by a large amount within that division.
Well, that's fair. If you think about it, in a person who trades actively, that makes a difference. Because sometimes you get the settled money versus like theoretical money. So if you have to wait 3 days or 2 days for it to settle, sometimes you can't buy anything else until that money settles.
Right.
So that shortens that period also. So we'll see if there's any more kind of like domino effect, how things change over the next couple of years.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Now, you want to talk about like ex-dividend date and stuff like that. What do you want to refer to with that?
Right. Sorry. So I need a cough button. So if what happens here is that when you buy stock, when they declare a dividend, so what is dividend? A dividend is when the company shares some of their profits, whether it's stock or cash. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a day, a cutoff, when you no longer get the dividend. Mm-hmm. So they have a declaration date, which is the day they declare it, because they have to declare it based on the board of directors. Then they set a record date. The record date is the day you must be an owner of record, which is settlement. So like if you buy stock on Monday now, you become an owner of record on the next day, Tuesday. Mm-hmm. So you must be an owner of record by that day, that record date. So let's say the record day is May 25th and it's a Thursday. That means if you want to get the dividend, you have to buy it in time that you will be settled and complete on Thursday the 25th. Mm-hmm. So prior to this, you had to buy it 2 days ahead of time. Now, if you buy the stock the day before the record date, you will settle on the record date and get the dividend. What I try to tell people is, I want you to imagine the transfer agent. This is the person who handles all the money and all the shares for the firm. At the end of the day, they're looking at this massive list of people who own the shares, and everyone who's on that list gets the dividend. If you're not on the list, you don't get the dividend. So if you buy the stock on Wednesday, the day before the record date, you will settle by the end of the day on Thursday. Your name will be on the list, and you will get the dividend. But if you sell it the day before, then your name comes off the list, and you won't get the dividend, which is fine.
Mm.
So now the X day, X is Latin for without, like ex-wife, ex-girlfriend, ex-dividend. Okay. So if the X day is a day you don't get it. So now the X day becomes the same as a record day.
Mm-hmm.
The X day and the record day are the exact same day now. It used to be the day before. Now it's the same day, because think about it. If the record date's Thursday and you buy it on Thursday, you settle on Friday. You're too late. They don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea who you are. So the day, the actual record day is the same as the X day. We used to have an acronym DERP,
Yep.
DERP, kind of out the door. Now it's like D and E and R next to each other, and then
right.
Now, So here's a question for you: what happens to the stock on the X day? What happened to the price of the stock?
I don't know.
So it's amazing. It drops by the amount of the dividend. So if you buy it before the X day, you buy the stock and you get a cash dividend.
Right.
If you buy it on the X day, the actual stock drops by the amount of the dividend. So there's really no difference between buying it before or either on the X day or before it. As a net whole, you end up being the same, because you either pay a higher price and get a dividend, or pay a lower price and don't get the dividend. No difference.
Right.
So that's a little bit of next day, and that's a big deal on this test.
Yeah, and that was going to be the next thing I want to talk about is now how does the settlement date change to T+1 change the test, right? And I think you just touched on one of the biggest ones, which is the old acronym DERP was needed to figure out sort of like in the process of buying a share that has a dividend and it getting transferred across, who gets the dividend on each day, right? Like on Monday, I would get it. On Tuesday, I would get it. On Wednesday, you would get it, right? So now that's been compressed to the point where now even the acronym's DEP.
I don't even know. I guess so. It's like, I don't even know what to say anymore, right? So it's like E and R merged together. So you can still sort of think DERP, just know the E and the R are kind of next to each other. So it would be D on top, ER next to each other, and then P. Other than that, I mean, if you just remember the X day is the same as a record date, life gets easier. A lot of things get easier with this T+1.
Mm-hmm.
Bonds. Remember, it used to be treasuries and options traded T+1, and everything else was T+2. So you have to remember, now everything's T+1. It does, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what else is it like? How's it going to show up in the test?
Okay, so most of the time, everyone I talk to they're basically just asking, if you buy a bond on this day, when does it settle? So if you buy a muni on Friday, when does it settle? Monday.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be harder because you had to remember. Now it's easy. If you buy stock on Tuesday, when does it settle? When? It might say when's the X date, which is the same as the record date. It's not going to be hard. It's not going to be crazy. I don't know that they actually do accrued interest, but again, if it was an accrued interest question, now hopefully you guys know what accrued interest is. We can spend 2 hours on that. But it's literally just what you owe in when you buy a bond, where you have to pay the seller what they're owed in interest.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have to count 2 days forward. Now you're just going to count 1 day forward. I'm not going to help with that one. We'll have another episode on the whole accrued interest. But it does really, most of the questions are going to be, when does something settle? When is the X day? That's really what it's going to be.
Right.
Or they might say, which one's not subject to T+1? And it's literally mutual funds. Mutual funds have their own settlement process.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I think it just makes it kind of simpler for everybody. Like both taking these FINRA tests, which I think is not their priority, but also like in the real world.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Do you have?
I mean, in reality, there's not much to do. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up here and talk about on this topic?
The only thing is, remember, this is what we have to assume, that as of even now, you will get questions on it, and you will get questions on this. They're not going to wait a long time for anything. It's going to be on there. So from now on, you assume everything's T+1, and we go from there. I mean, that's really what it is. Just one quick recap before we jump off. Regular way settlement is when the broker-dealers settle with each other. That's T+1. Reg T settlement or payment date is when you have to pay, and that's been shortened to T+3. That's the important stuff. Literally everything I said for the last 20 minutes gets encapsulated into this. Regular way settlement is T+1. Reg T settlement is T+3.
Yep. And now regular way settlement is the same as, treasury settlement and those other settlement types.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all T+1.
Everything's the same. So easy. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
This has been Achievable's FINRA podcast, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Ken Finnen from Capital Advantage Tutoring. And Achievable has courses for the FINRA SIE, the Series 6, 7, 9, 63, 65, and 66 exams. You can try them all out for free by going to our website, achievable.me, and if you like them, be sure to use the code podcast to save 10%.